Grab a cup of tea or listen as you go, ladies. This is your hour with Dr. Zoe, your life and relationship coach, with encouragement, on-point insight, inspiring guests, health tips, and advice. Dr. Zoe helps busy women keep their mind in the game by redefining your superwoman. You're listening to The Dr. Zoe Show.
Hi, I'm Dr. Zoe, and today's show is all about women and our anger. And I'm a life and relationship coach, and you are a woman who is strong and capable and sometimes tired. And it's okay to be tired. Just because you're tired doesn't mean you're not strong. Just because you're tired doesn't mean you can't still get it all done. I'm here because I believe that every woman has a superpower, and my passion is to help you find it, embrace it, and share it with the world. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is anger and how to lasso that anger and use it in a healthy way in our life. So my guest is Dr. Bernard Golden. He's the author of the book, Overcoming Anger: Strategies That Work. So let's be honest, ladies. Our anger can be destructive sometimes. Our anger can damage our relationships. It can lead to being an estranged family. It can lead to job loss, addictions, and even imprisonment, although I'm sure most of you women are not going there with your anger. But this past year, it was probably, I would say, the year of the angry woman. I'm sure that's been probably put everywhere. You know, that's what spurred the Me Too movement. And so, women are coming more in touch with their anger, but there's still that societal pressure that women shouldn't be angry, that, there's something more wrong with a woman who's angry than with a man who is angry. And there was this article by Leslie Jamison in the New York Times last month. And in it, she said, "Of course, it wasn't anger when I was 4 years old and took a pair of scissors to my parents' couch, wanting so badly to destroy something, whatever I could. Of course, it wasn't anger when I was 16 and my boyfriend broke up with me and I cut up the inside of my ankle, wanting so badly to destroy something, whatever I could. Of course, it wasn't anger when I was 34 and fighting with my husband, when I screamed into a pillow after he left the house so our daughter wouldn't hear, and then I threw my cell phone across the room and spent the next 10 minutes searching for it under the bed. Of course, it wasn't anger." So that notion that female anger is unnatural or destructive, that's learned super young. And children in research report perceiving displays of anger as more acceptable from boys than it is from girls. And so it's important that we learn to deal with, that we learn to have a healthy relationship with, and we learn to express our anger well. And so Dr. Bernard is going to give us a few tips, ladies, to help us do that. Now, I know sometimes we women are just hangry too, and that's a real thing. But either way, it's an issue, and we've got to work on it, ladies. So my superwoman win for the week is that I finally got an article done that I've been trying to work on forever. So that's definitely my work week win. I've been kind of slacking on getting my articles done, and I love writing. And when I get into it, it feels so good. But sometimes I don't know if it's just procrastination or just a busy life. I don't get into it as often as I want to. So my win is I got an article done, and that article was about knowing when to quit. So my superwoman fail, and this is kind of funny because for those of you who follow my show, 2 weeks ago, I gave a health tip about leaving your cell phone off for that first hour of the morning. So getting all of your morning routine in with the cell phone off, and how healthy that is, and how you jumpstart your day without, getting the dopamine fix from the cell phone, and you can set intentions. So I do practice what I preach. I do my best to practice what I preach. And so I've been leaving my cell phone off in the morning. So I've been getting up and leaving it in its cradle, not doing anything with it, doing my morning routine, getting the kids off to school. Well, I've been so proud of how I've been doing that. And it has felt really good. And I really do feel like I've been able to set my intention and pay attention in the mornings. And it sets my day off to a really great, healthy start. But, it was one of those mornings and I had 3 kids. I had to get to 3 different places, and it was kind of raining, and my son had bike practice. I was rushing everybody to try to get everybody where they needed to go, and got out of the house to bike practice, and bike practice was canceled. And it was such a hectic morning. I could have really benefited from not having to get that one up and off to bike practice. But because I didn't cut my cell phone on, and of course the coach was like, I texted you early this morning. And I'm like, yes, but I'm practicing no cell phone in the morning. So I didn't know you texted me. So that was the superwoman fail, is that I did follow my own health tip advice and I've left the cell phone off. But, maybe we have to practice balance too. Not such a good idea when you've got a million things going on in the morning and people might need to get a hold of you. So that's my superwoman fail. So let's get started. Let's get into this topic. We are talking about women and our anger. Dr. Golden, you are the author of Overcoming Destructive Anger Strategies That Work. And we women need some strategies that work. We're sometimes very angry and we need some help. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk about this subject because I think we women are angrier than we used to be 20 or 30 years ago. And for that lady listening out there who knows that you're struggling with your anger, you are not alone. And society often thinks of men as having a big issue with anger, or bigger issues, I should say. But I think that we women can sometimes give men a run for their money. Sometimes we get angry. We say we're not going to get angry anymore. We yell at our kids and then we feel horrible, or we take the anger out on our spouses and we feel horrible. And so we are going to talk all about that. Dr. Golden, you are an anger specialist, correct?
Yes, studying anger for over 30 years.
Wow, that's awesome. And so I want to talk about, why are we so angry?
Anger is so much about feeling threatened, whether we're really threatened or not. It's perceived threat.
Okay.
It might be to our emotional well-being. It might be to our bodies. It might be to our resources like time, energy, and it might be to those we love.
Right. And so I'm guessing that for most women, our anger starts early, but we get triggered. We get triggered by messes. We get triggered by house chaos, by whining kids, by overwhelming work demands and overwhelming home demands and finances and things like that. And so when we get triggered, I'm thinking it's not necessarily about the things that are going on right now, but really about some of the other stuff from beforehand. Would you say?
Very often, the anger that we feel regarding any kind of a triggering event, we sometimes know ourselves that it feels a little overreactive. And when you have that awareness, most likely it's involving other past experiences as well, where you're feeling overwhelmed. And I say the emotional brain says, "Oh, it's happening again," and then that leads to that level of anger.
So that trigger is, okay, it's happening again. So whenever, our spouse says something to us, it's a trigger, right?
Right. And at that moment, all the feelings of those past incidents as well kind of become cumulative in our intensity of anger.
It's funny because I have a client and we were just talking about anger, and she was saying that she dropped a piece of ice on the floor when she went to her fridge and got some ice, and she just wanted to scream and yell and throw this huge fit. And then she realized, okay, I think I have a problem with anger, because we all know it's not about the ice.
Right.
Yeah.
There's that sense of feeling out of control at times, especially with all the tasks that women are involved in and the demands. And so when we feel out of control, again, that triggers our sense of feeling threatened.
Right, right. And I think that there is that feeling for a lot of women today, of that sense of not being of not being in control. We have that constant mantra of, we've got to have work-life balance. We've got to balance this. We've got to, have it all together. And just like I say, we've got to love the beautiful chaos that is our life. And sometimes our lives are a bit chaotic. And so in that chaos, we don't always feel that control. So what can a woman do who notices, what, I'm struggling with this. I'm always angry. I'm always mad at my spouse. I'm always mad at work. I'm mad at my kids. What can I do to get over this?
A number of strategies include recognizing that anger, besides a reaction to some kind of threat, it's also a reaction to some negative feeling. So I might feel overwhelmed. I might feel inadequate. I might feel self-doubt. I might feel discounted. And so one is to recognize those feelings. And it's also especially to be aware of expectations that we may have without the full awareness that many of our expectations are unrealistic. I might convince myself I can accomplish 5 tasks within an hour, when in reality, my entire history says I can only do 3 tasks.
That
So
would
it's
be me.
developing unrealistic expectations.
And that's so hard sometimes. And I think that's a big one is that we have to really look at what we can do and what we can't do and be realistic about that. And that's a struggle for me, I have to say, as a working mom and all the other, things that I do in my life, I do tend to overcommit. I won't say I overcommit that much anymore, but I definitely maybe overschedule to a certain extent and have that feeling of, oh, I can get it all done. And then you get frustrated. You get frustrated with yourself. You get frustrated with everyone around you. So the first thing is to try to recognize that you have limits, right?
Right. Recognizing limits, recognizing the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you happen to be disappointed with yourself that you couldn't get those 5 tasks accomplished in the hour,
Mm-hmm.
then being aware to cultivate a more compassionate self-talk rather than a tough love self-talk that's highly critical and judgmental.
Yes, you talk about compassion for yourself and compassion for others. And I think it's so easy to have compassion for other people. You can understand how other people can, sometimes have deficits. But when it comes to ourselves, we judge ourselves so hard. How do we have compassion for ourselves?
It takes a lot of cultivation over time to be
Mm-hmm.
aware that maybe I can begin to say some things to myself that I would say to my best friend. You're right. It's easier to be compassionate with
Mm,
others. And somehow we believe, for a variety of reasons, whether we feel we're not lovable or less than, or that we don't deserve to have compassion. But it
mm,
is that awareness to say, okay, gee, I'm having this tough love voice, this highly critical voice. What can I do to replace that with something more compassionate? One of the fears that people have with self compassionate inner dialogue is I'm going to be too easy on myself. I'm just going to overlook and then I won't get anything done. And compassion really is more realistic than that. Compassionate voice is being the best parent you can be to yourself and being realistic as well in terms of consequences that would happen. What's in your best interest is always the question of self compassion rather than a tough love voice.
that's beautiful. And so, ladies, if you're struggling with anger, one of the first steps is recognizing that you're being really hard on yourself and that's hurting you. And you've got to be able to pay attention to the things that you're telling yourself about who you are in this world, about what's going on in the situation, and what we therapists call reframing. You've got to be able to look at it and ask yourself, is this true? I had a client this week who was upset about her weight. And she heard herself, and we talk about self talk all the time. And she was saying, it's not fair because I have to work harder than everybody else does to get this weight off. Nobody else has to work as hard as I do. And I had to stop her and I had to say, wait, is that true? You're saying that to yourself and then you're getting angry about it. But is that even true? And when we could break it down and go, wait, okay, yeah, maybe some people lose weight faster than she does or easier. Maybe some people have a higher metabolism, but there are other people who have the same issues that she has and lose weight slower, just like she does, and maybe even slower than she does. And when she was able to recognize that she's lying to herself and then she's getting upset because of the lies that she's telling herself, she was able to take it down a couple notches.
What happens so often is that when we are suffering in some way, we end up feeling we're all alone and we're
Mm-hmm.
isolated and no one else experiences what we experience. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like you say, she says it's not fair. So you had her become more realistic. At the same time, many people say life's not fair.
True.
And I think that's an unrealistic expectation that life should be fair.
Ah.
I say drop the fair in the sentence, life is not fair. I say drop not fair, and you get the real answer is that life is.
Ah.
And unfortunately, some people suffer more than others, and that's true. But in many ways, we can try our best to make sure we don't. But at times, we don't invite it purposely.
I love that. Life is. And that, oh gosh, that's so true. Life is. And when we can look at things in a more realistic way, number one, we don't have to take things personally because a lot of times anger also is about taking things personally when it has nothing to do with us. And we can also recognize that sometimes we're just not being honest with ourselves.
Right. I had a client a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
She came in after having a lump in her breast diagnosed. It wasn't yet decided whether it was malignant or benign. She was furious. And understandably, anyone who has an illness, a diagnosis, creates anger as a very quick initial reaction.
Sure.
But I sensed her anger was more than just about the diagnosis. And very quickly, she talked about, this isn't fair. I don't know anyone my age, and she was already in her mid 40s.
Mhm.
I don't know anyone my age, my family. No one's ever had to deal with this. There's a high expectation and unrealistic expectation that it's not fair, and that only fueled her anger more than just the diagnosis, even.
Yeah. And, I think women, especially women in my demographic, they're in the thick of things in their lives, doing a lot of stuff. And I think there's often that feeling of, this isn't fair. It's all on me. And why doesn't he have to deal with this? Or, why is it this hard? And so I think that's a great reframe for women who are experiencing a lot of anger, is that feeling, maybe those unrealistic expectations that, what life is. Yeah.
Also, if we could acknowledge we may engage in an activity and have mixed feelings about it, especially when we're overly stressed,
Hmm.
remind ourselves that maybe we are making choices and recognizing that an activity is my choice, even though it might be I call a 60-40 choice or a 75-25 choice.
Mm.
I'm not wholeheartedly embracing this choice, but when we find ourselves feeling overwhelmed, reminding ourselves that we have a choice, it helps us feel more empowered and less angry.
That's true. And a lot of times we do feel like, well, it's not fair. We're stuck. We have no choice. But the reality is that for most people living in the Western world, we have choices. They're not always the choices we want to make. We sometimes have to choose between, the worst of two evils, but we do have choices for sure. So, what are some other tips for women who are in the middle of, maybe feeling very angry and want to figure out, how do I stop responding in a way that I am then shamed or feel guilty about afterwards?
I use an acronym B.E.A.R, B-E.A.R.
Uh
And until I find a more calming and relaxing acronym, I'm going
huh.
to still use B.E.A.R.
Okay.
B refers to breathe deeply, inhaling and exhaling.
Uh huh.
And studies have found, for example, that if you inhale to a count of 3 and then exhale to a count of 6, you help regulate and reduce the heart rate to help you calm yourself. E stands for evoke physical calmness. Now, unfortunately, this takes rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And I say doing body scans or relaxation exercises, the more you do it, the more you know what your body feels like to feel relaxed. Then you can evoke it at the moment you need it. But it does take rehearsal, just like learning to run your fingers across the computer keyboard. It takes practice. So that's
Right.
evoke physical calmness.
So hold on. So
Sure, go ahead.
evoke physical calmness. So I didn't really understand that one. So you're knowing your body, you're figuring out what makes my body feel the most physically calm. Is that what you're saying?
Right. It starts with body awareness to
Mm-hmm.
know, okay, when I'm angry, what am I feeling in my body?
Mm-hmm.
And some people actually, they may be so angry they're not aware that they're feeling tension in their chest or around their eyes,
Mm-hmm.
or they're feeling reactions in their gut.
Right.
And so taking time daily to practice a body scan, and a body scan might be focusing on your head down slowly. What am I feeling, if anything? My forehead, around my eyes, my jaw, my neck. And doing that kind of a scan routinely. Also doing a relaxation exercise. One that I encourage is picturing your muscles relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
beginning again with the forehead, muscles around the eyes, muscles around your jaw, back of your neck, going throughout your entire body. Picture the muscles relaxing, letting go of tension, stretching out ever so slightly. There are lots of these kinds of exercises. I give some in my book. There are some on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're rehearsing. And then when you're angry, using anger as a signal to direct your attention inward to your body to then relax it a little more.
Okay. Great. And so what's the next one?
A is aroused compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And that again means turning your attention inward, recognizing if I'm angry, I'm suffering in some way. Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling stressed, anxiety, feeling inadequate? And being compassionate at that moment involves directing your inner dialogue to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. Feelings sometimes are hard to sit with. I'm going to sit with this for a moment. I don't have to do anything with this right now. It's giving yourself permission to have and sit with the feelings for a while.
So recognize I'm angry and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to react, because a lot of times it's not even our anger that is damaging, because anger is just a feeling. It's a feeling like all the other feelings. It's what we do when we're angry that can sometimes be so damaging in our relationships and in our lives. And so if you can sit and go, okay, I'm angry, I'm having this feeling. And I always say that anger just tells us something's wrong. And so we might want to look at, okay, what's wrong? What do I feel is wrong? Let me feel it and not try to not feel it, because I think a lot of women have this feeling of it's not okay to be angry, or I have to suppress my anger. And then we blow up because we've suppressed it so much. So I like that. You just saying, ladies, when you're feeling angry, feel it, but you don't have to react. You don't have to do anything with it in the moment, but just feel it.
And feel those negative feelings behind it as well. All too often, we run into anger because when we're angry, we're usually focusing attention on others or a situation, or we get angry at ourselves. But behind the anger, as I indicated, maybe we're feeling anxiety, maybe we're feeling discounted, ignored. So sitting with those feelings as well. And compassion could also be recognizing, well, I guess my expectation is unrealistic. To fit, for example, coming back to 5 activities in an hour requiring I can only handle 3.
Right.
It's recognizing and being compassionate at that moment. And that's part of arousing compassion. And then the R of B.E.A.R involves reflecting on, what are my expectations? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings behind my anger, to help recognize them? What conclusion am I making about myself? Gee, that's pretty judgmental. Is there another conclusion I can make that isn't as critically judgmental? So it involves reflection.
Right. So when the ice falls on the floor and you want to punch somebody, you can reflect and realize, okay, it's not about the ice. What's going on? What am I upset about? Right?
Right.
Okay. Wonderful. Do you think that the core of most anger issues is self-hatred?
Not necessarily. I think a lot of anger can be directed at itself. Sometimes our threats are about our own self-esteem or our own self-worth. Sometimes they occur in our interactions with others, and we may direct it toward ourselves. So I don't see it as being always self-hatred, but I think that highly critical, judgmental voice does come from a self-hatred, self-devaluation, self-critical voice that is unrelenting at times.
Right.
So in that sense, I do see anger is very much directed inward. More women than men might lead to anxiety and or depression. Whereas men might act out their anger. They may strike out. They may verbally be aggressive. Women, again, I say traditionally turn it inward. That's changing. In fact, there are some statistics a while back saying that in the last decade or so, in terms of violence, when anger is acted out, 11% more women, an increase in women being involved in domestic violence, 40% higher since 2005, women arrested for violent crimes. So that's the extreme end of anger. But just in general, women are feeling more comfortable with not just suppressing it, but acting on it.
So is that why you think women are becoming more violent, is because we're feeling more comfortable with our anger?
I do think so. It is more accepted.
Okay.
And in competing with the male world at times, I think there's almost it supports some of that. Exactly.
I can see that, I guess, on one level, but I still obviously maybe more accepted. Okay, 11% more accepted, but I still feel that angry women are much less accepted, in society than angry men.
Definitely. There was a study done about using undergraduate students. They would listen to jury transcript tapes, and they were told that this one person was undecided. And when the one person of the group of people in the jury, they had transcripts, what they were told this person was angry and they were a man versus they were told the person who's undecided is a woman expressing anger. Mm-hmm. More of the undergraduates switched and yielded to the opinion of the male.
Interesting.
So yes, women are seen as being less feminine, and that's the challenge of dealing with anger that women experience. How can I deal with my anger when I have a narrower window or a narrower range that it can be accepted?
Right. Exactly. A narrower range that it can be accepted, which is why I think, you talked about women pushing anger inward and developing depression because there's that push to not express it, to try to express it in a nice way. I think was it Uma Thurman who recently spoke out about the whole Me Too movement, but she said, I can't speak until I can do it in a way that I'm not so angry because of that knowledge that angry woman has a negative connotation in society. And so, with that knowledge that we do tend to try to suppress it, I think that at home sometimes, maybe with our kids and our husband, we don't suppress it as much because we're not, out in society. And I think we can sometimes be scared by our anger when we are in private. How do we work on cultivating a healthy relationship with that anger?
I'm going to answer that question, but I wanted to back up in terms of that comment about I had to wait until I wasn't so angry. I remember hearing her make that comment, and I thought that makes perfect sense. But all of these movements are an outgrowth of the history of suppression.
Right.
And channeling when I see marches like that, or even those students marching, I see that's a expression of healthy anger. Mm-hmm. Let me clarify what I mean by healthy anger. Mm-hmm. It involves learning the ability to pause and reflect on anger rather than react to it. Right. That's part of what defines healthy anger. Healthy anger also involves turning our direction inward when we're angry to better understand what are the expectations we had, what are the feelings associated with anger. And also something that I've not mentioned yet, anger is invariably a threat to some key desire, some key value that we all have. So it might be a threat to feeling empowerment. It might be a threat to feeling trust, security, safety. And so healthy anger involves taking time to reflect on the meaning it is. I say that every moment we stay in anger is a temporary reprieve from feeling the sting of those negative feelings. And healthy anger is helping to recognize that.
I just loved what you just said, that every moment we spend in anger is a temporary reprieve. So anger, I think in that way, you could almost become addicted to anger if you're trying to continue to stave off those negative feelings.
It very much can be an addiction. And it's interesting that physiologically, when we get angry, our cortisol, the hormone involved in threat, fight, flight response, when that rises. But the moment we act out the anger, it lowers. And so that alone helps recognize that it is addictive. It can be addictive. And because, like you say, it's a distraction and reaction to those other feelings. And it's so much easier to, many times, for many people to sit with the anger rather than those feelings behind it. And healthy anger, too, involves learning how to let go of anger. And in terms of communicating or expressing, assertiveness communication, which involves I statements. When you did blank, I felt blank.
Yes.
And fit that in with a negative feeling. And then sharing that when I feel that negative feeling, I might move into anger. And then the fourth part of assertive communication is also saying, what is it you want? All too often, some people, when they're first learning assertive communication, they'll say how I feel. But it's equally important to be able to identify what is it you'd like the person to do instead. That's the negotiation point. And then you can go from there.
That is so important. And I think especially for women, because sometimes we have that sense of, we're reacting, but we don't do anything. So we might just be angry. We might yell at our kids or we might yell at our spouse, but we're not actually requiring a change of behavior. And there's that statement that consequences yell louder than screaming or something like that. And it's really about recognizing that if you feel yourself being angry, then sometimes it means you need to put in healthy boundaries, right? And that's exactly what you said, is saying, what do you want? And also, this is what I need.
Exactly. And part of anger management is about learning new skills. So, as a parent, all too often, I see parents over the years, and I'll ask them, how many books have you read about parenting, or how many classes have you attended? And most people haven't. We get this idea of that we should know how to parent.
Yes.
We model it with or without full awareness on our own experience, or relatives, or TV. And yet, learning specific skills, parent can develop a sense of competency, a wide range of strategies, and that's what helps reduce anger as well.
Same thing with relationships, right? How many people, read books about how to do relationships? Often we just do what we saw. We don't really think about learning how to interact and be a better partner in a relationship.
That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think of that statement of she who holds the tongue holds the power. How do you think that that plays into healthy anger? I guess it's always finding that balance between when do I speak and when do I hold my tongue, and what is repression and what is me being assertive.
If you're holding your tongue so you can pause and reflect and think through, do I want to express my need? Maybe you're in an interaction and you realize, my expectation is unrealistic. Maybe I don't need to say anything. On the other hand, you can think through holding your tongue so you could identify and think through what is it you want to say. And in that way, it's constructive.
Right. And
But the
sometimes,
challenge is to be self-soothing enough to be able to hold your tongue, or to be self-soothing enough that you're not immediately attacking yourself for being wrong or having your self-doubt triggered. It takes time to reflect and explore what's going on.
yeah, it sure does. Takes a lot of practice, but so worth it. So worth it when you can actively work on your anger, and developing a healthy relationship with it is just so worth it. So, Dr. Golden, can you tell us about an anger log? What is it and how can we use it?
Sure. I've developed an anger log that I offer in my book, and it's a way of looking at an anger episode, I'll call it. And I have the reader identify in the trigger in specific words what happened, what was said. Then I'll have them give a rating of their anger. It's looking at the episode as if they're looking at an imaginary video that they can wind and rewind slowly, frame at a time, and to back up, for example, from the level of anger and recognize what was going on in their body. What were they experienced physically? What were the negative feelings associated with anger? What knee-jerk thought did they make immediately following the event? Some conclusion they made about the event, or the meaning they gave to the event. And backing up to what was my expectation, and then key desire. And I have people complete this log both to understand an anger episode, but also the more they do it, one, they start seeing their hot buttons. They see themes and feelings, or themes in terms of a sensitivity to feel, for example, distrust, or perhaps abandoned, or betrayed. They see themes in terms of their expectations. And once you start seeing patterns, you can also become more aware for the next time. So it helps them recognize in real life and in real time, be more aware what's going on. So the log is kind of like looking at that 1 nanosecond of anger triggered. It takes a magnifying glass to what's going on internally to help trigger that anger.
That's great. So, if you're experiencing a lot of anger that you know is destructive to yourself and your family, then creating this log, getting a journal, and creating a log like this can be helpful as you walk through this journey of really developing a healthy relationship with your anger. So, how can people get your book?
It's available on Amazon as well as in bookstores and other websites.
Great. And it really details why we're angry, especially when it comes to destructive anger, and how you can understand your anger better, and steps to deal with your anger in the moment, correct?
Right. Focus on understanding the anger as well as mindfulness and mindfulness and meditation practices, as well as self-compassion skills that can help really begin to sit more comfortably with negative tension in our body regarding anger.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Can you think of any last tips that you would give a woman who is struggling with her anger?
Well, I think it's important to remember that there are skills, regardless of how you've been dealing with anger in the past. Anger is a habit. It's a habit in our thinking, our emotions, and in our body. And it takes time to learn new habits. But the good news, I say, is that we can learn new habits if we take the time to commit and practice these new skills.
I love that. That's so true. Anger does become a habit. And just like any other exercise or any other thing that we want to change in our life, we have to commit some time to it, right? To focus on it, to make some changes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Golden, for talking to us about our anger. And you can check out his book. You can get it on Amazon. Can you say the title of your book again?
Overcoming Destructive Anger Strategies That Work.
Awesome. And we can also go to his website as well.
Right.
And what's your website?
Angermanagementeducation.com. And I have links to other articles as well as downloads that are available.
Wonderful.
Regarding anger.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. So I think that was a great conversation with Dr. Golden, and I hope that you women out there got some really good tips and some nuggets about your anger and about how to deal with your anger. I think he just has this super relaxing energy. And if I had some serious anger issues, I would definitely find him and have him be my therapist because I could just sit on his couch and say, just talk, you talk. Just listening to your voice will totally calm me down. Because I feel like he's never been angry a day in his life. And I know that's not true, but I just love his psychoanalytic. It feels psychoanalytic. I'm not sure what his theoretical background is, but I love that presence that he has. I think it's perfect for the work that he does. And it's funny, as I think about that, there was a client that I had years and years ago, and she had some major anger issues. And we did a lot of working through her anger. And she asked me one session if I would record my voice going over the skills or the tips that we use for working on her anger to kind of talk her through it. And I did. And it was helpful for her. She used it outside of the session. The funny thing is, I think I recorded that on a cassette tape. I'm so dating myself. And she must have been listening to it on a Walkman. If you guys are in your 40s like I am, you remember the Walkman. I've said that to my son before, and he was like, the what? It was a Walkman. We could listen. We put our little CDs. We had the CD version and the tape version. So anyway, it is Real Talk with Dr. Zoe, and this is where I answer questions from listeners and I share my own musings and encouragement. Please reach out if you have some questions you'd like me to address on the show. All questions are anonymous. I take your confidentiality seriously as if you were my own client. So you can email questions to me at zoe@drzoeshaw.com or connect with me on any of my social medias. So I kind of wish I had this question before I did the interview with Dr. Golden because he could have helped me answer it. But actually, I was talking to a friend about the interview and she asked this question. So clearly I'm recording this a day after the interview. She asked me, how do I know if I should seek help for my anger? It's an excellent question. And the important thing to realize is that anger is a part of life. Anger is one of our natural feelings, just like joy, just like sadness, just like happiness, just like fear. There's nothing wrong with that feeling of anger. The problem is that when we, in our anger, do things, our behaviors, the things we say or we do when they are inappropriate and not acceptable, that's the problem with anger. So it's really about utilizing and controlling it. So if your anger is working for you, you'll know that because you'll be able to address issues openly without aggression. You'll be able to walk away from confrontation feeling good, like you have gotten your point across, instead of feeling regret, like you wish you hadn't said or done something. But if you feel that you can't let go of your anger If you have ever blacked out in anger, that's a big sign that you need some help. And actually, the blacking out and explosive anger has been linked to seizure disorders, and they actually treat with seizure medication. But you definitely need some help if you've ever blacked out because of your anger. If your friends and family tell you that you're angry, and you probably need some help. If you find that your thoughts are predominantly angry thoughts, if you find that you're kind of always tense and you realize that you're always irritable, and if you feel that you spend a lot of time thinking or plotting revenge, you're angry and you need to get some help. And that's one of those lines. Certainly, if you're aggressive, ever physically aggressive or otherwise, verbally aggressive when you're angry, then that's a sign that it's time to seek some help. And if you've ever lost a relationship because of your anger, you need to seek some help. You don't want to keep going and losing more relationships because you haven't been able to work on your anger. And finally, if your children are fearful of you when you're angry, you need to get some help. Time to get some help, lady. So yes, there are definitely some signs and signals that it's time to get some help. I hope that those were helpful for you. And thank you for tuning into the Dr. Zoe Show. New shows go up on Tuesdays, every Tuesday morning. If you knew a friend who might benefit from any of my topics, please spread the love and share my show. And if you like my show, leave a review. And you can connect with me at drzoeshaw.com or any of my social medias at the handle Dr. Zoe Shaw. And you can work with me by going to my website and clicking on Work with Dr. Zoe. Join my free newsletter by texting the word JOIN to 38470. And I look forward to speaking with you wonderful ladies on social media throughout the week. Have a super week.
You've been listening to The Dr. Zoe Show, redefining your superwoman, with your host, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Don't forget to sign up for her monthly newsletters to get encouragement, tips, and skills for keeping your mind in the superwoman game. Connect with her now at www.drzoeshaw.com. Tell your friends and subscribe to her podcast on iTunes. Join us next time for another edition of The Dr. Zoe Show.